This video is for anyone who's sitting there with 20 unfinished manuscripts on your laptop. It's time. It's time for you to get it together. I'm sorry to say. We all know that a lot of people say they want to write a book. And we all know that a lot of those people don't end up writing a book. Something gets a little lost in the execution phase sometimes. Now, we've all been there. We've all been a chronic non-completer of manuscripts, okay? I feel you personally on a personal level. So, I've compiled a list of 10 tips that I think helped me when it came to finishing the frickin' draft. If you don't know me, I'm Brielle. I recently finished my first book, which is titled Unraveling. It is a new adult fantasy with dystopian vibes and an enemies to lovers romance. And I wrote this manuscript in about 6 months, drafted the whole thing, and it is the first project I've ever completed. Yeah, I hope that this can be a little motivating, a little inspiring for you if there's a project that you're dying to get onto the page, but you're struggling a little bit. Without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, set yourself bite-sized goals or some sort of writing schedule. The entire time that I was drafting this book, I always had a goal that I was working to. And the 1 month that I didn't was by far my least productive month. I wrote the least words. So I set pretty much monthly word count goals for myself, and I also created a writing schedule for my entire year so that I could map out where I wanted to be by the end of 2024 and create monthly checkpoints. Hey, I need to write 10,000 words in January, 10,000 words in February. And this was so helpful to me because when you look at a manuscript on a huge scale, it can be really overwhelming. But when you create these more bite-sized goals, one, it gives you smaller checkpoints to reach for. It gives you a sense of what pace you need to be drafting at, because otherwise it can get really soupy really quick. It also can be really motivating if you're able to publicly share that goal in any way. It can help to keep you accountable as well. So obviously on this channel, I share what my word count goals are and such. If you do something like NaNoWriMo, where there's the accountability of a lot of other writers, that can be extremely helpful. But overall, I would say give yourself some sort of goals or timeline. Looking at the timeline, knowing, hey, maybe I could be done with draft 2 by the end of this year is also going to help motivate you, because you'll realize how far you can get if you're able to stick with the pace that you're setting out for yourself. You can do this in really hard or really soft ways. Hard ways meaning you could set yourself like a strict deadline of this draft is due on January 1st, and if I have to stay up till midnight the night before to do it, I'm gonna do it. Like, you could treat it like a school or a work assignment, or you could book something, for example, a cover designer in the future to force yourself to work on the book, or a manuscript critique from yours truly, link down in the description. That's something that I did. I have a cover designer booked for April, and I booked that pretty far in advance. One, because the cover designer books pretty far in advance, but two, because having that sort of exciting milestone in April motivates me to want to get to a good place in the project so that I can design the cover with the knowledge of my book and not go into it blindly, you know what I mean? Plus, I put money down on that, so putting down a deposit, it's just a way to guarantee to yourself, I'm seriously doing this. I don't want to lose those few $100s, like, we're taking this seriously. Obviously, know yourself. If you do not trust yourself to actually work under that pressure, then don't do something as concrete. You can also just do a simple little goal of, I would love to write 5,000 words in this month, and then just track towards that. So use however much accountability and strictness you feel like you need, but I think setting bite-sized goals is key. And kind of going off of that, track your progress in a way that's fun for you. Some writers love tracking word count. I loved tracking word count. That was so fun to me. It made me feel so accomplished at the end of every single day that I wrote. Other writers don't love that, so maybe it looks a little different from you. Maybe you're tracking each chapter and coloring in a circle every time you write a chapter, or coloring in a circle every time you write a scene. I did that as well. The more methods that I was tracking with, the more motivated I was to keep making progress on the project. Honestly, coloring in circles, that's my favorite method now. I don't think I'll ever go back. I think I'll use that method when I revise, when I draft again, just because it's so physical and fun and it looks pretty and it's something you can show off. Like, look at all these circles that I filled in with each 1,000 words I wrote this month. So that's my preferred way of tracking, but find whatever is satisfying and makes you feel accomplished. And that's going to also help to motivate you to keep making progress on the draft, because you're going to want to color in another circle. Okay, number 3, I think the reason why a lot of people end up not finishing finishing a draft is because they don't know where it's going when they start. And I'm guilty of this as well. But even if you are a pantser and you don't have everything figured out, which we'll get to this a little bit later, but I recommend being okay with going into the draft without everything figured out. But even if you are a pantser, I think you need a sense of direction, because every project that I started and dropped in the past, I couldn't have told you what the main conflict was going to be. I didn't know where the book was going. I had maybe a concept and an idea, and that was about freaking it. So I think you need a sense of direction going into a book in order to actually stick with it. And for me, what I would recommend having when you start the project is some concept of the midpoint and the final destination. You don't need to have the nitty-gritty details, but just an idea or some semblance of where the book is going. What are going to be those two pivotal moments? Yeah, just know kind of where you're going to be in the middle of the book and where you're going to be at the end of the book. It doesn't need to be ultra nailed down. You just need to be heading somewhere in order to not just get lost in the sauce and get stuck. Number 4, all hail the brain dump. I have sung my praises about brain dumps in the past. No! God, there's so many ants in this apartment. I can't. I have sung my praises about brain dumps in the past, okay? I swear by them personally. I think they are so valuable. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in terms of finishing your draft is because the brain dump will be your fountain of ideas throughout the drafting process. There were a lot of times where I would be in the middle of drafting and I was kind of like, okay, like I'm lost. Where do I go from here? And I would consult my brain dump and read some snippet of an idea that then led me to the next group of scenes. You know, I think when you start a book, or even before you start a book, as soon as the idea enters your consciousness, you need to start a brain dump document, and you need to start writing down or voice memoing or somehow recording every single idea that comes to you related to the project. And do not self-censor your brain dump, okay? There's going to be stuff in the brain dump that later on you think is silly and stupid and you scrap it, and that's fine. But write it down anyway, because it's really hard to know when the ideas first start coming in what ideas have like a little nugget of gold in them and what ideas are going to be trashed. So it's hard to tell at the beginning. So I would say keep everything, compile everything, and later you can go through with a fine-tooth comb. But having that brain dump, having that long list of ideas, it's what's going to help you when you get stuck. Like, you need ideas to fall back on. You need that sort of brain food that your mind can use when you get stuck in the draft. Number 5, you need to be able to release perfectionism a little bit and embrace the I'll figure it out later mindset. Not with everything, of course, because you still want your draft to be usable in some sense. But I think that there are times when you can get tripped up on a certain section of the draft, and then because you feel like you need to figure that out before you move on, you can really slow down your momentum and totally like halt your progress. So I'm a big believer that, especially with the first draft, when you are just literally laying down the bricks, the foundations, if you will, you need to be okay with letting go of needing to get everything super nailed down. Forget that. You need to be able to release that perfectionism and tell yourself in certain moments, I don't have this part quite figured out yet. That's okay. I will figure it out later. Trust a little bit in future you, in revising you, to have the brain capacity and the ability to hopefully fix these little areas. You need to be okay with that. You need to be okay with not everything being perfect in your first draft, or you will never let yourself get to the end of that first draft. And very much going off of that, number 6 is know when it's time to move on. If a scene isn't working or a chapter isn't working, you might not have the tools or the knowledge yet to make that scene or chapter work. You might need to revisit that portion after you've had some distance, some time to work on your craft, to work that scene out. Maybe it's just not happening for you right now, and that's okay. You need to know when it's time to say, that's as good as it's gonna get for draft 1 and I need to move on. There's one scene that comes to mind when I was drafting Unraveling. I had this big monumental moment of the main character getting essentially kidnapped and this huge fight ensuing, and there's magic going on and weapons and violence, and it's crazy. It's probably the most elaborate scene I've ever attempted to write because I haven't written a lot of action scenes, I guess, in my life. Definitely not my strong suit naturally. I spent a really long time working on that chapter, probably like multiple days working on that chapter. And even though I did quite a bit of work and I gutted it and I restructured it all during the drafting process, I hit a point where I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm 100% happy with this, but it's as good as it's gonna get for draft 1. And hopefully future me can clean this up. And I will say, after having reread it, I now can see a lot of the things that still need to be changed and adjusted, but I got the bones down and I got it to a decent place where now I can run with it in draft 2. But I honestly don't think at that time, with my perspective on the story at that point, I had the ability to write the scene better. And sometimes it's just as good as draft one, you can get it, you know? Because later you're gonna have more context about the overarching story, and you're probably gonna be a little bit of a better writer because some time has passed and you've learned a few things. And then maybe you'll be able to create a better version of that scene. But sometimes you gotta know, okay, it's time to move past this. I've spent long enough on it. I've gotten it as good as it's gonna get. Let's continue. Okay, tip number 7 is to find a writing or accountability partner. I do talk about my writing with people in my personal life, which I'm really glad that I do, because they will ask about the project and I always want to be able to report that I've made some sort of progress. That really motivates me to stay accountable. If you don't want to share your writing with people in your personal life, you can find like an accountability buddy online. There's lots of writer spaces on the internet. Literally, this channel is one of those writing spaces. AuthorTube is one of those spaces. I think it's also helpful to have like 1 or 2 like friends or fellow writers in your life that you can divulge more about the story with and bond maybe about both working on a project. I was drafting this project and my friend Mick, who's also a writer, was also working on her book, and that like sense of accountability and community that we got from like both being writers in the thick of it with drafting and like talking about the struggles, I found to be really motivating. Also, there's like a little bit of a fire under your butt that comes from not wanting to publicly, I don't want to say fail, give up on your book. So there is some power to, you know, mentioning it and just having it out there. Hey, I'm working on this thing. That's going to help motivate you to want to finish it and be able to say, yeah, I actually stuck with that. Like, I actually did the dang thing. Also, I'm a big fan of just accountability partners in general. My friend Amina and I do like these little accountability check-ins every month or so where we'll set little goals and then check in on, okay, how are you doing with this? Like, what step have you gotten to in this list that you created? Things like that. And I think that's so helpful. You could totally do that with a book. Just saying to someone, hey, I want to be done with this book by this date. Can you check in with me? Can you remind me? Can you hold me accountable? Can we talk about it throughout this time so that I can make sure that I'm getting there, you know? It can be a writer, it can be a non-writer, just someone who can help keep you accountable and talk about the project with you. Tip number 8 is to outline as you go. Now, obviously this is more so for my pantsers. One of the main reasons why people never get their manuscript off the ground, like never even start a book or don't get very far at all, is because they put this pressure on themselves to have the entire book figured out to a T before they start drafting. And sometimes your ideas just won't work that way. Sometimes they'll be a little more mysterious. They'll be something that you need to partially figure out through discovery drafting. Maybe you don't yet have the tools or the ideas just haven't been quite planted in your head yet. And maybe that inspiration will strike down the line. But if you are holding yourself back from starting your book or getting past chapter 1 because you're waiting to have it figured out, waiting for the book to be figured out to a T, you will never get there. You'll never get there. You can't force those answers at the beginning of the process just because you want to. That's at least my opinion on it. Some people are great at plotting the entire book before they start, but if that's not happening for you, that's okay. Take whatever you have and get started. And then as you get later into the project, continue to outline the sections that weren't clear to you at the beginning. Maybe you just know the midpoint, the climax, and generally what needs to happen in the first like 5 chapters. Okay, write those first 5 chapters. You're gonna get some ideas while you're working on those first 5 chapters, and then outline chapters 6 through 10. And you can go through the story in chunks like that, outlining as you go, so that you don't need to have all of that figured out before you even start the drafting process. And this will also help keep you from getting stuck because you always at least have a bit of a headlights view of, okay, this is what needs to happen in the next few chapters, even if you don't have the entire book plotted to a T. Okay, number 9 is to skip sections when you need to, and don't be afraid to put in some brackets at times or some temporary details. This is something that I had to do a couple times during the drafting process when I just genuinely did not know what scene needed to be there or what I was missing. There are entire little sections of the book that I simply had no ideas for, and so I summarized what was going on during that time period and I moved the heck on. And sometimes that's what you need to do. It's very okay also to put in temporary details. I can't even tell you how many false details there are in my current manuscript. It's actually kind of hysterical. Things that while I was doing the reread, I was just marking up the manuscript like, no, what? That's like not true. Things about the magic system or the government that I now know are completely false, but at the time I just needed to put something in there that might work and continue on. And sometimes that's okay, as long as it's not a detail that's literally going to affect the entire course of the book, it's okay to just have kind of a temporary fix. For example, maybe you don't know how many years ago some historical event happened, and for now you're just gonna throw in some detail of the revolution happened 100 years ago. And maybe later you're gonna look back at that and be like, no, it freaking didn't. No, it did not. But that's okay, because you put in that temporary detail. You know that you need some piece of information there. You've made it clear that this element of the world needs to be addressed at this point in the novel. And that's enough. You know, as long as it's not literally going to impact everything else that happens in the book, it's okay to have that filler there. I know some people do this with character names or location names. I've definitely done that as well with location names. Personally, I do feel like I need character names pretty much during the drafting process in order to be able to write them, but I know some people don't feel that way. Basically, my point here is it's okay to have brackets. It's okay to have sections that are not yet filled in. Just leave the blanks there. Leave a little blurb of what needs to happen maybe in those brackets, or leave a temporary detail and then fill in those blanks later. That is an okay thing to do. Here I am, enabling brackets. And number 10 is more of a fluffy, sweet tip, but it is just to daydream. Daydream about your story, daydream about your why. Why are you writing this book? Is it because you want it to impact readers in the way that you were impacted by stories growing up? Is it because you love the idea of getting to sign books and do book signings at Barnes & Noble? What is your why? What is the things that light you up when you think about them and daydream about them? I'm about to embarrass myself a little bit. But I'm the type of person who needs to think of like something very blissful to fall asleep. And the thing that I've been thinking about the past few months is just imagining myself signing books, signing copies of my book to like ship out in little packages. That's my going to sleep thought for the last several months. And you know what? That really does help to motivate me and make me excited about this journey that I'm on. So find whatever that one thing is for you and let yourself daydream about it. If you love your love interest, let yourself daydream about him. Put on like a song you like and imagine him doing like really epic poses in like the wind, you know, whatever you gotta do, I don't know. But find something that genuinely makes you feel dreamy and like inspired and just brings the magic of writing to life to you. Or even if it's part of the lifestyle that writing can give you, you know, maybe you're really excited about being able to be a full-time author one day and be able to just like make your own work schedule and stuff. You can daydream about that. Maybe that's what lights a fire under you, you know? And now that we've done all the sweet little tips, it's time to enter tough love mode. I feel like I should be wearing glasses for this. Please help. Tough love mode is going to be a little bit more brutal. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, a lot of people say they want to write a book. Very few people will actually do it and get to the end of a project. If this is something that you want for yourself, you need to get over your excuses and write the freaking book. Nobody's going to be as excited about your dream as you are, or as excited about your story as you are. Sometimes you need to just like be a little more ruthless with yourself and write the freaking book. Excuses will always be there. You know, there's always going to be something, whether it is, I don't have this world building detail figured out and I can't start the book until I do, or, oh, but I like this other idea, so like maybe I should just abandon this project, LOL. Or, oh, I just got stuck in the manuscript and there's nothing I can do to fix it and I can't crack this scene, so I'm just like not motivated to keep working on this project. Regardless of what it is, this is just a reminder to show up for yourself. If this is something you want, you can have it, but you are the only person who can give it to yourself. You're the only person who can finish your book. You are the only person who can do that, and you're going to feel so freaking good and so proud when you actually do that. Regardless of where you are in the process right now, I hope that this can be just that tiny little kick to get you back to it and motivate you to keep going. If you did get all the way to the end of this video, comment down below, okay, fine, I'll write the book. I just feel like that'll be funny. Even if you're not writing a book, just comment it, you know, it'll be cute. Quick little self-promo. One, I have a Ko-Fi page. If you guys like my content, want to buy me a coffee, that's always linked down below. And I'm also offering my manuscript critique services now. So if you want me to read your book, give you my feedback, or if you just want me to read your opening chapter, your first act, I'm now booking into the end of 2024. So if you want to give yourself a little accountability deadline for when you finally finish your draft, I would strongly recommend booking me. You can find those details in the description as well, okay? All right, that is it. I'll see you guys next week with another one. Bye.